This video is going to focus on how to measure your gauge on a brioche knit even swatch. When I say knit even in brioche, I simply mean you're working your brioche rib with no shaping, so no increases, no decreases. This is the most common way to measure gauge for a brioche project. So to measure my stitch gauge, what I like to do is choose as large a space of stitches as I can without going too close to the edge, because if there's going to be any difference in our gauge, it's going to be close to the edge. So I've decided to measure my center stitches over 3.5 inches because that section of stitches actually lines up really nicely with a span of 3.5 inches. You'll notice that I start at the 1 inch mark on my ruler. Actually, I'm using a tape measure. I find on tape measures specifically that this little doodad here moves around just enough that I'm not comfortable using the edge of the tape measure as a starting point for counting. I much prefer to start at the 1 inch mark. So I have counted out, it's 13 stitches over this 3.5 inches. If you're unfamiliar with counting brioche, these turquoise column of stitches each count as 1 stitch. But this valley of stitches, what we would work as the brioche purl on the right side, is also a stitch. So we count across and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and we've now got 13 stitches across our 3.5 inches. When I do the math on that, and I'll show you how to do that in the comments below the video, it works out to roughly 15 stitches over 4 inches, since gauge is typically given over 4 inches. Next, I'm going to turn my work and show you how I measure my row gauge, and I'm going to show you a little trick that I find really helpful because I always seem to have trouble counting my little vertical V's. So in order to count row gauge, we need to do something very similar to what we did with our stitch gauge. We need to choose a set distance over which we want to measure our stitches. In my case, I've lined up the 1 and the 4, so I'll be measuring my row gauge over 3 inches. And I've taken these little straight pins. You can see them here. I've got one here and one here. And those actually indicate where the 1 and 4 inch markers line up. So I know that I've got 3 inches. So now I can actually take my tape measure out of the way and simply count the V's. I'm going to try and zoom in here. Nice and close. So we're not going to count the stitch that the pin is through. We're going to count the one immediately below it. So actually, I'll use a pointer. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then we will count the one that the pin is in at the bottom, 16. That makes up for the roughly half stitch that we have at the top that we didn't count. So at 16 stitches over 3 inches, my gauge works out to be roughly 21.5 rows. So at 15 stitches and 21.5 rows, I know what my gauge is in brioche. As I mentioned earlier, I will include instructions in the comments below on how to measure or how to do the math once you've measured that gauge swatch. Hopefully that gets you on the right track, and happy brioching.